when I glued the box up, I kind of got ahead of myself here. What I should have done is cut the handholds and the hole for the port before I put it all together, but I didn't, so now I'll have to do it here. What I'm going to do here is cut the handholds. I'm just going to cut one on tape here, and then I'll do the rest of them off camera. I have a jig that I use, and I have my router set up for the right depth. So I just and there we have a handle. Okay, I'm going to drill the hole for the port on the front, and it's a 2 3/4 inch Forstner bit. I know everybody might not have a 2 3/8 inch, 2 3/4 Forstner bit, so you could probably do this with a jigsaw or something else like that to cut the hole. You want the hole big enough that when you put this plastic port on it, it is as big as the hole in the plastic. In other words, you don't want bees to come flying through this pipe, through this hose, and whack into the front of this thing. You want the bees to flow through completely without any obstruction here. I lined everything up before I started the video here. So the center of this hole is 6 inches down from the top and centered across the front. And I have everything clamped down here, everything tied down, so it should work pretty good. That's it for this. It's nice if you have a backing when you do this. I didn't have one because it tends to split out in the back. That's not really serious here because of what the device is, but it's nice to remember that. Now we're going to work on putting the bottom slide onto the box. What I've done is cut a piece of tempered hardboard here, approximately to the size of the thing. As you can see, it's a little bit longer, almost as wide. And I have 4 pieces of wood here that are a little more than an inch. And I'm going to cut a groove in these pieces so that I'll be able to slide this tempered hardboard in the bottom. When you're putting the bottom on, you don't want to put anything inside the box, because we're gonna make a part of the box that slides up and down in order to push the bees into the brood box. So you want the way that you put your bottom on, you want it recessed or flush actually with the sides, so that you can push that center thing all the way down. And that's what we're going to do here. Now, what I'm going to do is cut a groove in these 4 pieces. Actually 3 of them is all I need. And I'm going to make it the size that this hardboard can slide in properly. And a 1/8" blade, this is a full-size blade, an 1/8" blade cuts a groove that seems to work pretty well. So I'm going to cut a groove in these 3 pieces here. These will slide very well. Incidentally, I'm about 1/4 inch from the edge, and these pieces are more than 19 7/8, so that they can be cut down. Now, when I put this bottom on, I like to have it in the back, in the opposite side of where the port is. I don't know, it makes a lot of difference, but it seems to work pretty good that way. So you can see this is what it's going to do. I'll have to cut these to size, but these are going to sit and be glued down here. It leaves a fairly large piece on the bottom, and there's a reason for that. You can go smaller, but I had some problems with it. So I'll talk about that when I get to it. Let me first cut these pieces to length. I'll do that off camera. Okay, so I have 2 pieces now cut to the right length. This other one will of course go up here on the top. The thing I next need to do, looking for a pencil here, there we go. I'm going to have to cut these pieces off to the thickness of the wood. And what I mean by that is that the part that's above this groove is going to be removed. And that's so that on the back I can put a piece, one piece, it'll be 1/4 inch here, and then one piece that'll be on top of it so that the bottom can slide in and out. And I'll take this off on both of them. I'll do that off camera again. Okay, well here's the pieces cut, and now I'm going to, there's one bottom and one goes on the top. I'm going to glue these 2 pieces on, making sure that they are very smooth here with the inside face. Okay, now I have these 2 sides, and while I was off, I trimmed this piece of hardboard. Oops, let's go this way. So you can see that it slides in here okay. Now I'm going to do 2 things. One is I'm going to put a piece of 1/4 inch thick material here so that there's not a gap when I have this closed. And in the back, I'm going to have a piece just like the sides and have it go in there. These trim just a little bit, and I'll glue those in. One of the things that I do is I kind of V the groove in the back, and that's because when the piece of cardboard slides in, I want to make sure that it catches and goes into this groove. And if it was just the groove without any V, it might hit it and not actually go into it. So I'll go ahead and glue these pieces offline also. Thanks. Okay, now I've got this much done, and I can slide the bottom in and out, with to trim it of course. But I need to close this section here because when I put this on top of a hive, it'll sit like that. I can't have that big opening. So I've cut a piece here to fit, not lengthwise, but thickness. And I have to work these edges down just a little bit, which I'll do with a chisel, and then I'll glue these in place. And I'll do that off camera so I don't bore you here. Okay, I glued this other piece on now, and actually it came out pretty good. I have a very small slot here, about 1/8 of an inch, and that is what the bottom is going to slide into. When I was off camera, I also cut the piece, the bottom piece, to size, and I glued a handle, you might call it, on here, so that when it closes, this is bump up against the box. I also have, this one actually may not need this, because this hole is small enough that the bees probably can't get through it. But on my other box, I made this to have in the box when, after you pull the bottom out, you put this in so that bees can't get through this hole right here, this slot. So next, we're going to start making the part that slides up and down here, and after we finish that, then we'll go and make the top. Okay, what we're going to do today is build the slider that moves up and down inside the box. The purpose of this moving slider is so that after you gather a swarm of bees, and it's really pretty much only needed for when you're dealing with swarms and not cutoffs, you want to be able to push the bees down into the brood box. If you don't do this, my experience has been that what the bees will do is try to start making comb up in the bee vacuum. They'll attach their comb onto the screen that we're going to have in here and start to hang the comb down. And of course that's a mess, because you want to remove this bee vacuum later, because you want to use it as a bee vacuum, and get the bees down into the brood box. So by having this slide, you can push the bees down into the brood box and pretty much force them to use the frames that you have down there. Now, to make this slide, I've cut some pieces 2.5 inches wide, and what I've done is cut these pieces a little bit long. The reason I cut them a little bit long is that after I assemble the 4 pieces of wood here, I'm going to trim it on the table saw so that I get a pretty nice fit. I don't have to be really accurate. In other words, I don't have to get these things down where they're like a piston in a motor, but I want to leave a very small space on the side so that bees can't get up in the top. Now, for the cross pieces, I've cut these just a tiny bit long. You can see that. And I'll do the same thing on here. After I finish, I'll trim these down so that they are the right size. And I'm going to use a tool called the Festool Domino to attach everything here. Now what I've done is marked these pieces, so each corner I put a line on it and I've marked a number on it. That is so that when I go to assemble these things, I put them back in the proper order. The thing that you can get confused by is that you'll never put these lines in exactly the same place in every corner. So when you go to reassemble them, you want to make sure that you're putting them exactly the way that you marked them. The other thing that's very critical is that when you cut these pieces, you want the opposing sides to be exactly the same length, so that what you wind up with is a square frame here. I'll re-comment on that. The opposite sides need to be exactly the same length. If they're not, you won't get a square box or square frame there. I'm going to go ahead and cut these. I'm not really set up here. And I'll do the rest of these offline. So now I'll cut the mortises for all of the dominoes here. We're going to go ahead and glue this up. Then a little bit of glue on the dominoes. checking the numbers, I have number 3 here. 3 and number 2. 4 and 1. And I only have to put 2 clamps in here. And now we'll wait for the glue to set. While the glue's drying, I drew up an actual size of the slide. And what I'm going to do is put a cross piece in here that you can use to pick it up and put it down. And I then made a couple of pieces here with a half lap joint to fit. And it works out that the angle that you need to cut, the angle to the wood there, is about 20 degrees. Now I did these on my Capex miter saw because there's a feature in it that allows you to do these dado type cuts. But you can also saw this with any type of saw. Go about halfway down, saw the other one about halfway down, check them to make sure that they fit. There we go. And when we put this back, I'm going to screw these down on the top. And I'm also going to work a little bit of these edges off with a rasp, just so that when you go to pick it up, you don't have the sharp edges, that you have a little bit smoother thing to grab a hold of. Okay, the glue has set enough, and now I have to fit this into here. You can see that it's too long, and this first thing I'm going to do is to cut it to length, so that I can slide it in like this. Still a little too tight. Not quite there yet. Very close. tight there. Yeah. Need a little bit more on there. Okay, I'm satisfied with that. Okay, now I'm going to attach the handhold. What I've done is smoothed over the bottom of this so that when I go to pick it up, it's not as sharp. And I have marked where I want the pieces to go. I'm now going to drill a hole in here because I'm going to screw these down. All right, continuing on here. What I'm going to do now is just glue this down and use screws to attach it. And that's it for this. I'll clean up the glue and then we'll take the next steps. Okay, so I've cleaned up the glue pretty well. A little bit there. Okay, and what I want to do now is put a way of holding this in place. Now, cut these pieces of wood 1/2 inch thick, and if I put them in the right place, this will limit how far up it comes, and I can do some things to attach the top to the right place. So the question is, where do I put these pieces of wood? This is about, it's a little less than 1 1/4 inches, so I'm going to put 1 1/4 inches down, which I have set on here, 1 1/4 inches, and I'm going to draw a line. And I'll do that on both sides, but I won't bother you. And now I can put this piece of wood right along that line, and that should be the right distance for me to be able to adjust this thing. Okay, now I have the two pieces of wood in here, and that will work to give me the stop at the top. What I need to do is put some pieces, put some toggles, and I need to have the toggles supported. So I'll put 4 pieces of wood in these 4 corners here, and then I'll put the toggles on them. And I'll do that offline and show you the results. All right, now I have the 4 pieces glued on the top. You can see that I can just pull it in and it's up to that point. Now what I'm going to do is put some little toggles, and I made these little toggles. These will go here and will toggle over to hold this in place when you're doing the actual vacuum itself. So I'm going to put the toggles. The thing that's really important about the toggles is that they don't block the thing coming up. So as I put them in here, okay, so pull them tight and then give them a little bit of looseness. Okay, so now the top is locked into position, and I can then, when I want to drop it, I can turn the toggles and then let it down. So the next thing I'll do is put the mesh, the hover cloth on here. Okay, the hover cloth has to be 1/8 inch mesh. You can't use 1/4 because bees can get through 1/4 mesh. I cut this hardware cloth with tin snips. Works really well. And I'm going to attach it down with staples. So I'll position it where I want it. And that's our sliding top. I need to put some eyes in here and suspend this with string, and we'll do that next while I get the eyes offline. Okay, I have the little eyes here, screw eyes are called, and I'll put 4 of them one on each corner, and then one on the top. And I don't think you need to watch me actually doing this, so I'll go offline and then I'll come back online and show you the results of it. Okay, I have 8 screw eyes attached, one in the bottom and one up here. And what I'm going to do is use some twine, and I'll connect those two such that when the sliding portion is all the way down, the string is holding it. I'll just lay the thing down, and then I'll tie the string at each corner. Okay, I have put the eyes in on the corners, and I've tied the string. So I'll just show you how this thing operates. When you have a swarm of bees, the problem is that you need to force the bees down into the brood box. But you don't want to go too fast because you could squash the bees. So having this string, you can loop it over the outside screws like this, and the sliding part is down what feels to me like maybe 3 inches or so. Later you can come back, drop it down a little further, because the bees are going to, as you push them down, they're going to, some of them are going to migrate down into the brood box. Pushing them down a little further, this will cause them to more to go in. And finally, you can, and this will sit, the sliding part here now is sitting directly on top of the brood box. So the bees are forced down into the brood box. After you let it sit for a little while, get the bees accustomed to being in there, you can come and take the whole brood box off, put a regular top on, and you have a hive of bees. Now the reason for going through all of this is that if you've ever tried to transfer a swarm, say you go and you catch a swarm in a cardboard box, and then you try to dump them into a hive, they're going to be flying all over the place, and of course the queen could be flying all over the place also, and it upsets the bees, and you don't have as good a success in transferring the bees to a brood box. Now I'll also point out that when you do a swarm, a good thing to do is to put an excluder at the bottom of the brood box. This will prevent the queen from getting out. So you have a brood box with an excluder on the bottom, you put this on top, you force the swarm down into the brood box. The queen is definitely there, or she exists in the swarm, and she can't get out. The bees will begin to make comb, and they will eventually start, the queen will start laying and producing brood, and once they do that, they're pretty well going to stay. You're not going to have them absconding. Now the final thing to do for the box, excluding the top, is to put on this port. And this is a port that fits a regular 2.5 inch shop vac hose. And I got this one at Rockler. So it goes on with 4 screws, and we get a long just wanted to get a long thing here, just to make it a little easier. I've already aligned this thing as far as the holes go, so it's pretty easy to put on. Now, after you capture these, of course, one of the things you have to do is close up this port. And what I usually do is just bring a rag, and I stick a rag in it. But if you're a woodworker and you want to make some type of plug, wooden plug that you can stick in there, that'll work too. One of these days I'll get around to making a plug for mine, but I just haven't done it. So far I just stick a rag in it. All right, this completes the construction of the main box. We have the, oh, I lied. It doesn't complete the construction of the main box. The one thing that I need to do here is put a piece of wood and a toggle back here to hold the bottom in, because the last thing you want is for the bottom to come loose while you're transporting. So I'm not going to go through all that. I'll do it offline, and the next thing I'll do is start working on the top, and I'll try to show you this as part of working on the top. Thanks, and on to part 3. Okay, I put the toggle on here, so now I can turn it and keep it locked in, and if I'm transporting bees, I won't have a situation where the bottom can come loose and bees can get all over the place.